Risk is it's everywhere. It's a fundamental part of life, right? From investing your money to literally just crossing the street. But what if I told you that for most of human history, we had no real way to even think about it, let alone manage it? Okay, let's dive into the incredible story of how we learned to measure the unmeasurable. For thousands and thousands of years, if your ship sank or your house burned down, well, that was just bad luck. That's all it was. It was an act of the gods, a twist of fate. There wasn't any math, there wasn't any system. There was just this feeling that we were all just pieces on a board, moved by forces completely beyond our control. So, what changed? How in the world did we go from just praying for good fortune to building multi-trillion-dollar industries based on predicting the future? That is the question we are going to unpack right now. To really get this revolution, we've got to go back in time to a world before the 17th century. And here's the crazy part. The problem wasn't that people didn't have the right answers, it's that they weren't even asking the right questions. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Without a concept of probability, there's just no way to separate luck from skill or a random event from some kind of mystical sign. People genuinely felt they could influence a coin toss just by, wishing for it really hard. A mindset like that makes any systematic approach to risk totally impossible. And then the 1600s happened. Everything began to shift. It was like an intellectual explosion that gave us the tools, not just to measure chance, but to fundamentally change our relationship with the future. This is the shift that really unlocked modern capitalism as we know it. This mental shift was so deep, so profound, it actually changed our language. Before the 1600s, the word probable had absolutely nothing to do with numbers. It just meant something was trustworthy or approved of. It was a moral judgment, not a mathematical one. And this quote just illustrates the point perfectly. When this woman called a man probable, she meant he was a stand-up guy, someone she could rely on. The idea of saying there was a probability of rain would have sounded like complete and utter nonsense to her. Okay, while the theory wasn't formalized yet, some historians think certain people did understand its power, and they kept it a very closely guarded secret. So who are we talking about? Gamblers. They had a massive incentive to understand the odds, but an even bigger incentive to keep that knowledge all to themselves. Now here's a fascinating story from an ancient Sanskrit epic that kind of hints at this secret knowledge. So there's this emperor, Nala, and he gambles away his entire kingdom. He's totally ruined. And then he meets a man named Rituparna, who makes this incredible claim. He knows the science of gambling. To prove it, he does something amazing. He looks at this massive tree, counts the leaves on just one branch, and from that, he estimates the total number of leaves on the whole tree. Nala, of course, is skeptical, so he spends all night counting every single leaf. And he finds that Rituparna was almost perfectly correct. What Rituparna just demonstrated is the core principle of modern statistics. It's called sampling theory. It's this powerful idea that you can understand a massive whole by carefully examining a small, representative part. I mean, this is the foundation for everything from political polling to the entire field of data science today. It's huge. So, this new way of thinking didn't just stay in the realm of theory or gambling. Oh no. It went on to build one of the most powerful tools for risk management ever created: insurance. As soon as probability theory was formally written down, it wasn't just for gamblers anymore. It became the key that allowed us to build entire industries that could turn these individual, chaotic disasters into collective, predictable patterns. And at the heart of all this is a beautifully simple little rule. For independent events, so things that don't affect each other, the chance of them both happening is just their individual probabilities multiplied together. Now, that might sound simple, but its implications are absolutely profound. Let's use a classic example to see what I mean. Imagine the risk of any single house catching fire in a given year. It's a small but very real and very scary possibility. Let's just say that probability is 1 in 1,000. Now, for the person who owns that one house, that's an unpredictable and potentially catastrophic risk. But what about the risk that every single house in a group of 1,000 burns down in the same year? Now, as long as those fires are independent events, meaning one fire doesn't cause another, we can use that simple multiplication rule. The probability becomes 1 in 1,000 multiplied by itself 1,000 times. The number is so astronomically small, it's practically zero. The risk hasn't vanished, but it has been completely transformed. And this is the magic of pooling risk. While we can't predict which specific house will have a fire, we can predict with incredible accuracy how many houses out of a large group will. And just like that, you turn individual uncertainty into collective predictability. And that, right there, is the business model for all of insurance. Now, the very same principles that let us insure our homes also let us evaluate investments, which, as you know, is the core of all modern finance. So any investment has two sides to it, right? There's the good side, the expected value. That's what you hope to get back on average. And then there's the bad side, the variance. That's how bumpy the ride is going to be to get there. A safe government bond has really low variance. A hot new tech startup has super high variance. Finance is really just the art of balancing that potential reward with all that risk. But here's the thing. Our models are not perfect. We've built these incredible tools for managing the risks we know about. But what about the risks we don't? The ones we can't even see coming?
You see, a lot of financial assets don't follow a neat, predictable bell curve where most things kind of cluster around the average. Instead, they have what are called fat-tailed distributions. And all that means is that the tails of the curve, where the really extreme, rare events live, are fatter or more likely to happen than we'd normally expect. And it's out there, in those tails, that fortunes are made and lost in an instant. The writer Nassim Taleb gave these events a famous name, black swans. They are those rare, high-impact events that just seem to come out of nowhere because they lie completely outside our normal experience and expectations. Think of the 2008 financial crisis or the global pandemic. And this brings us to our final thought for today. We've come an absolutely astonishingly long way from just seeing risk as fate. Our ability to measure and pool uncertainty has literally built the modern world, from insurance to the stock market. But the biggest challenge still remains. How do we prepare for the risks that lie beyond the edges of our data, and even beyond the edges of our own imagination?